Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFirio. I am your host for the show. These almost 8 years of podcasting, well over 900 published episodes, and lots to see over at keystotheshop.com. Especially good for you to be subscribed to the show on both YouTube as well as any other podcast player that you choose. Spotify is really big lately to listen to podcasts. I do both Spotify and Overcast, and you might just use Apple Podcasts. But either way, stay in touch by being subscribed and share these episodes far and wide. That really helps the show. It helps you because you're always updated with new episodes as they come out. Now, this show, Keys to the Shop, is not the only thing we do. So Keys to the Shop is both a podcast as well as a consultancy, kind of a coaching business. I work and spend a lot of time, most of my time these days, on working one-on-one with coffee shop owners to help them open great cafes or improve their great cafes, or if not great things are happening in your coffee shop and you want somebody to come alongside you to assess what's happening. How can we improve? How can we elevate our operations, our culture, our quality, and become more profitable, be more joyful in the process of running this business? There's a lot of different things that I've worked on over the course of these many years with Keys to the Shop and in my own career that can offer you value and perspective and tools to succeed in the coffee shop. So if you're interested in consulting and coaching one-on-one with me in the new year, we're taking on new clients in 2025. Something to think about if you've been on the fence. Maybe it's just a matter of taking the next step to sign up for a discovery call. Just email chris@keystotheshop.com. There's a link in the show notes also to set up that discovery call. You can DM me on Instagram @keystotheshop. Let's have a conversation. It's easy as that. And then we'll see what comes from that conversation. It's just nice to talk. And if anything, we'll get some perspective on your situation that you might find helpful, even if you don't end up working with Keys to the Shop. So hope to talk to you soon. And today's episode, we have the two sponsors. We've talked about them before. We talked about them today. Of course, that's Arto brick, tile, stonework, hard surfaces for your coffee shop. Awesome stuff. And also the Pacific Barista series, plant-based beverages that are the cornerstone of your cafe and have long been that for the industry. But we're going to talk about both Arto and the Pacific Barista series later on in the episode. But right now, I just want to introduce you to our guest today. And we're talking with none other than Justin Piercy of Daddy Got Coffee. Justin is now full-time with Daddy Got Coffee, which is his social media or his media company that's dedicated to helping people brew amazing coffee at home. He has a very popular YouTube channel, website, Instagram account. I think he's on TikTok as well. But mostly that's where I know him from. But Justin has been responsible for some pretty funny videos and also extremely helpful content breaking down different gear, what it does, how to use it at home to prepare coffee that you and your family will love. And, Justin is a family man. You get to see little vignettes of his family sometimes on these videos. And that, one of the things I love about Justin is how approachable he makes the whole subject that today is actually very confusing in sort of a good way. We have sort of an embarrassment of riches right now in the world of gear, lots of different things to comb your espresso with, lots of burr styles and espresso machine types. And what do I do? How do I get this? And you're always kind of worried. If you're diving into that world, you need someone to help guide you to the right gear. And this is kind of what we talk about today. First, how Justin got into this, what his perspective and philosophy is, and how he balances this whole world of quote unquote influencing people in their decisions for coffee gear, how to stay away from gear acquisition syndrome, or as called it gas, how not to get gas, and uh, just what goes into how cafes have upped their game or changed as a enthusiast culture has leveled up the baseline of coffee understanding for the general coffee buying population. And so we talk about all these things, Justin and I. It was really fascinating. And he has a lot of great philosophies and perspectives on education, guiding people, balancing life and work, not being led by the nose by the metrics, because this is the world where he lives right now with full time. He used to be a sound engineer and now he's full time, actually, just recently, completely full time with Daddy Got Coffee. And as a business owner, just like owning a coffee shop, there is this idea of how the metrics, can be something that sometimes might even distract you. But there's a lot we're going to talk about. I was really happy to get Justin on the show. Real stand up guy, doing some good work for coffee education online and making things a little less intimidating and actually fun for people still, instead of being super, super serious about coffee. So let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with Justin Piercy of Daddy Got Coffee. Hey, Justin, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. I'm good. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me. Been looking forward to this one.
Yeah, me too. I think one of the things that I love about these types of conversations is the fact that literally everybody in coffee got into it as an enthusiast who kind of had that spark on their palate and their brain. And they thought, what would be a good idea is if I just like spends too much money and time focusing on coffee.
Yep,
And some
exactly.
people turn it into like their whole personality and their career.
Yes.
And then some people don't. They just keep enjoying it. I don't know. I'm 25 years into it now, so I feel like it's a pretty permanent thing.
Yep.
But you have a similar story in coffee, getting into coffee in your unique way. So I'm glad to have this time to chat. So, how did you become obsessed with coffee? What was the catalyst for your story?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's probably a story that like many people who listen to your podcast will be well familiar with. Like I had a cup of coffee that just was totally beyond what I expected. And that first cup that was really different was it was a Guatemalan, actually. Some friends who had visited Guatemala brought some coffee back that had been roasted down there, and it was not nearly as dark as like the commodity stuff that I'd been drinking to that time, and it just was very pleasant, nutty, nuanced. Um, and then that was what started pulling me in. And then I had, I didn't get the blueberry bomb. I wasn't in that wave, but it was a strawberry bomb coffee for me.
Oh, it's always the
From
berries.
Yeah, from Pilot Coffee Roasters in Toronto. And then after that, I was like, okay, this is really different. And then I just got totally sucked in, direct trade, single origin, fancy brewers, fancy grinders, all that kind of thing.
Yeah. So that then you had done this at what year was this when you had this strawberry bomb moment?
I feel like I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I think it was 2015,
Oh
maybe.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, 2014, 2015, maybe.
Coming up on 10 years.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Time flies. And in
Yeah.
some ways, it feels like a lifetime ago. And in other ways, it's like, seems like it actually wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, so that rabbit hole that you gone down in terms of gear and coffee, 2015, I think there was still a good number of resources online for people to kind of look at, like, how do I replicate that experience? Because that's what it's about, right? You're like chasing a taste
Yeah,
in
totally.
that moment. In the old days, we used to call the espresso, that one espresso, like the God shot. That's like an old term from the early 2000s. But there must have been some really key places that you went to learn more that kind of helped you into that journey? What were some
Yeah.
of those places for you?
Well, the first brewer that I got was an AeroPress, and
Hmm.
I don't really, not the first brewer, but the first kind of specialty brewer. I don't really remember. I just remember Googling stuff and seeing what I could find. And
Yeah.
I feel like, the YouTube scene wasn't really established at that point, and social media, like as niche specific as it is now, wasn't really a thing. So, I feel like I must have landed on Home Barista at some point.
Yeah.
um, Coffee Geek. I feel like I was on his page, but it was interesting. A lot of what I was looking up was actually just on stores, and there was this Australian store. What was it called? Espresso Unplugged, I think. It was just like they're just a retailer, and I would just like go and look on these products, and then I would just Google reviews of them and try and find recipes for different things. And I feel like it wasn't at that time as uh, besides home barista, of course, and I wasn't quite at that level at that time where I was that into it. But I feel like I just was googling stuff online,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of disconnected from any kind of real network.
Same. Yeah. But I'm curious about this now that you said you were just experimenting with things. You weren't that into it. Um, but you were into it enough to experiment. And when you
Yes.
try different things, were you excited to get different results or were you disappointed to not get exactly what you wanted?
Definitely a combination.
Okay.
So, my first like really fancy brewer was a rock presso. Have you seen these things?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And my dad got me one of those, and just kind of as a gift. And I had this Mr. Coffee blade grinder, and that's what I was using with this rock, and obviously getting pretty terrible results. I would go to the local, I would call it like a second wave type roaster,
Yeah.
and get like the espresso blend because like I didn't know any better at the
That's
time. And it was like black as coal, of course. And I'm grinding it up with this blade grinder and just getting really frustrated. And then I would polish up the rock and put it back up there on the shelf for a few months and just kind of let it make me feel good about myself that I was like this kind of coffee connoisseur person.
Yeah.
And I would use the AeroPress, which I would get quite good results kind of no matter what I did with it. And then I would pull it back down. And then for a while, it was this cyclical kind of beating my head against the wall uh, moments with getting good results with the equipment that I had moments. So that's kind of, I would say, how my journey really kind of started to go. And that frustration was what really drove the more intense, like research and discovery.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because you have in that like what the dark night of the soul moment where you're just looking at your accusing espresso machine like looking down upon you as like you'll never be satisfied.
Oh, I knew it was me. I'm like, I'm just doing something wrong here.
Okay.
And it was like, I knew that there, and that's why I didn't get rid of it. Cause like, I knew there was like, there's some way to unlock something out of that thing. And
Yeah.
the resources weren't what they are now. You couldn't just go on YouTube and pull up whatever review of whatever thing that you were using and kind of get a primer on it. It was a lot more, I don't know what the word is, but it was a lot more scrappy, like the information that you could find online at the time.
Sure. And so that it believed in an ideal that you hadn't achieved yet, but you knew that other people were doing it somewhere
Yes.
and that you could do it too. So you were just like doggedly pursuing this. And it almost feels like this is the kind of thing that customers often will have happen to them when
Oh,
they go to a
totally.
coffee shop. They say, well, I had this really great coffee, and then occasionally they'll get it again the same way, but sometimes it's inconsistent. So it's almost like a mirror image, like a home enthusiast traversing that journey feels
Yes.
similar to a customer.
Yeah, totally. And, I know we were talking before, I am somewhat rural, where I live, and like at the most generous, I would say small town. So for me, geographically, it's not like there were these hubs that I could just go to and like ask questions and
Hmm.
stuff. Occasionally, I would go down into Toronto and I would have these amazing cups at Pilot Coffee Roasters. And it was like, that was what really I'm like, man, this is what I want. But then I would go home and then I wouldn't go back there for like several months or even into the city where some of these cafes were. Um, so I think that dependent upon where the customer lives, that can have a big impact on their early journey. Now, I think some of that has changed with how much more info is available online now.
Yeah.
But for me, that was definitely part of it, for sure.
Well, so in your, I want to take it back a little bit here. You, as a consumer, became an enthusiast, and you have this experience. It, what were you doing before that? What kind of professional experience did you have, or do you have, like in this world where it came in to play with your coffee pursuits? So sometimes a lot of people have like a professional background that because they have these talents or skills or associations, it allows them a certain understanding of coffee. What was that for? Do you feel like that was somewhat helpful in your case?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I have done, several different types of career, audiovisual stuff. I was a creative director for a long time at a church, and then I moved into like a digital strategy role. It was a
Oh,
larger church, so it kind of had a role like that. Um, and I would say that my wiring, just in general, really kind of sucked me in more than my professional experience itself. I will say the professional experience, really my wiring informed the professional experience in the direction that I ended up going in with it. Um, I'm kind of this hybrid of like a creative person and a very like logical, rational person. And I think people who have that type of wiring tend to get sucked into the world of coffee because it has like this creative experience focused component, where it's just like the flavor is just like a palette, of paint, that it's always different, and there's that grounding, that slowing of experience.
hmm.
But then on the equipment, the research side, the rational part of you, and even on the coffee like processing side, the origin side, is always trying to figure out what is contributing to this specific part of that flavor, and how can I understand how all these things work in different ways. And when those two things marry up, they just pull you right down the path. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so I think different people get pulled in for different reasons. But for me, it's that combination of the creative side, the rational, logical side, just kind of meeting in this perfect middle ground of the hobby and experience of enjoying coffee.
Cultivating that experience for yourself and then helping others do it the same way. I mean, this is, there's so much of a parallel between music and production, and like mastering a track or getting levels to the point where, like in a church, for example, like a lot of churches are like warehousey, not acoustically stable
Yep.
environments, and so you're like, oh, is there's one instrument that's like way too loud, and you have to cater to the unique environment that that particular musical experience is happening. It's similar to your kitchen or the cafe
Yep.
or the city. So I
Absolutely.
love that you have that experience, because fine tuning those things for the amalgamation of all the decisions that you make, so that you can have like, oh, this is a good cup of coffee.
Yes.
It's silly and kind of wonderful all at the same time.
Absolutely. Totally agreed with you there. It's over the top, but in order for that really good thing, you need somebody behind the scenes who is over the top about that thing. And I think that's
Ooh,
very true in
yeah.
a cafe, not just about the coffee brewing, but also about the customer service aspect of it. for home, home enthusiasts, like there's no denying that coffee guys and girls are really intense, let's say, about their coffee setups.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's all in the name of optimizing that experience, and farmers, it's the same thing. The really good farmers, they're over the top about this stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's all in the name of that perfect cup.
Optimization is an interesting word because we do have sort of an eternal pursuit of the ideal, or kind of like an upward trajectory, but all so that we say achieve something, but once we've achieved it, it's like, oh, well, I kind of want to pretend like I didn't achieve it, so I'm going to keep going.
Yes.
uh so for some people, the journey ends where they have their grinder, their water, their machine, their coffee, and they just never, that's it.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, like, how you navigate that space, because on the platform that you've cultivated here,
Hmm.
there is there are gear reviews galore. There's all sorts
Yes.
of ways to optimize and fine tune. It could lead people to never be satisfied, which is kind of not the point, right? 'Cause is
Yes.
to get satisfied is the
Absolutely.
point. So how do
Yes.
you balance that in the way you produce content?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. Um, I There was a really, and it's something that Sarah and I talk about a lot because we're not like, we try and live beneath our means. We play it safe with our finances. We're not like crazy spenders. We try and not take on debt for things. And just as a lifestyle, that's not really our MO. And I know, to look at my espresso setup, you wouldn't necessarily think that, but that's, because it has come our way as a result of the platform that we have. I think there was, and we talk about this dynamic a lot as it pertains to the audience, making sure that we're not putting out there a sense of like, you always need to be upgrading your stuff or you're kind of a schleb. And it's definitely not what
Yeah.
I think. And it's not what we believe. And it's not what we want to put out there. That being said, one thing that we kind of put words to that was really helpful is, there are different categories of coffee enjoyer. One of them is, like you said, looking for the best product for what they need. They're going to buy a grinder and a brewer. They're going to keep it for 5 years, and they just want to make the most informed decision as they can. There is another category of person who um, doesn't look at coffee as a grocery item. They, I'm speaking more about home enthusiasts here.
Yeah.
They really look at it as a hobby, and it's not a kitchen appliance to them. This is a hobby that they enjoy, and just like cyclists, it's like, I mountain bike on the side. I've road biked. Right now, we're in an area that's great for mountain biking. You know, there are people who have a bike, and there are people who are bikers. And it's like, they
Yeah.
spend more money on bikes than what most people would consider to be reasonable. Um, Same
Hmm.
for photographers. Lots of people have a camera. Not everybody is a photographer. Musicians, very similar, and it's like, in every niche, there are people who enjoy the experience, not just for the end result, but for the process. And people who are in that situation tend to invest, maybe at a higher level than what most people would consider reasonable, but it is with a bit of a different mindset. And once we kind of named that, it allowed us to speak to that audience a little bit more, transparently and directly, without, I don't want to say it's a justification for, gear acquisition syndrome. And it's like, we don't just like, that's not a mentality that we have. But it's more, when those people are ready to say, okay, I've experienced this thing, I just think I would like to try something else at this
Yeah.
point. Not It's hard because it's like, that is a privileged position for a hobbyist to be in, you know, whether you're a cyclist, photographer, musician, coffee enthusiast, whatever. So I'm always very cognizant of that. But also, I don't want to make people feel guilty for enjoying their hobby. So
Right.
it's kind of just putting the purchase decisions within the proper context uh, for where a specific person is at, and
Yeah.
um, and I think that that's something that we try and do as we're kind of cultivating the direction for our platform. Um, and yeah, and I think that's probably, it's a long around way to answering your question, but it is a very important question, especially for me that's doing gear reviews. You know, are you just telling people that the newest thing is the latest and greatest and they need it to get the best cup of coffee? And I think the answer is absolutely not. You know, you can get a Flare Neo Flex and a hand grinder and make fantastic espresso for under 200 bucks. There are also guys who just want a La Marzocco because they have the means and that's the machine that they would like because this is a hobby for them. And that's
Yeah.
okay, I think. You know,
Yeah, sure.
it's kind of it's very, all this stuff is very context dependent.
Well, it's interesting because we do justify our purchases over time way more than in a moment of time. So if you count up how much money you spent in the last 6 years on Netflix, subscriptions, you might be able to afford a La Marzocco Mini or something like that. I don't know. But we don't see it, and so we kind of we place value in things um, based on our lifestyle. And if you really want to break it down that way, you can't really pass too much judgment on people for investing in things that are a an adornment to their lifestyle, because we all
Yes.
do it.
Yeah,
And in fact,
absolutely.
the way you describe it, it reminds me that everyone technically does not need to go to a coffee shop. What a waste, you know? You do, you spend all this time and money and effort to go in there and get a cappuccino. You could make it at home, but some people decide that their version of a lifestyle choice, enjoying people, enjoying the atmosphere, they invest in that the same way as somebody might invest in, you know, one of these zero retention grinders that costs a lot of money. For them, that's their thing,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Yes. And I would say, you know, for Sarah and I, it's, we try and make all of those decisions very intentionally. You know, we have budget meetings where we go over our budget together. We make sure we're, you know, I have a whole video about this on my YouTube channel.
Mm,
It's like we talk about these purchases before we make them. We talk about our ongoing spending and we decide ahead of time, this is the type of thing that we want to do and this is how we want to shape our lifestyle. We plan for that. We try and not take on debt. And then when we have built up enough money or set it aside in our budget to do a certain thing on an ongoing basis, we say, okay, let's go do this.
yeah.
And I think what those things are going to vary for every person. You know, I think
Hmm.
some people love going to the cafe. There's a couple great cafes around us now, but when we first got into this, there wasn't, you know? So it's really different.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned earlier was like gear acquisition syndrome.
Yes.
Yeah, is that like an inside term that people use?
I've seen it in coffee world. I've also seen it in photography world. Any of these kind of higher spend hobbies where you can kind of get trapped in the upgrade cycle. I've seen that term used.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just love that the acronym is GAS, just
Yes.
GAS. You've got some
Yes.
GAS going on.
Yes.
You are then. Let me ask you this, because the enthusiasts from this is just my own opinion, and I'm curious what you think about this. They have an outsized impact on, or like a trickle down effect of, yeah, they're spending more money on this stuff, but sometimes the experimentation and the optimization that they engage with opens up new understanding about coffee that commercial entities then use to iterate their equipment, or
Absolutely.
it even like puts the pressure on a cafe to say, well, now, you know, a lot of people can make way better cappuccinos or espresso at home than we can make in our cafes. So there's almost like this influencing, not the technical way of we think about it, you know, but it impacts the industry in a pretty significant way.
Yep, yep, I would agree 100%. Like I think of really any of these. It's all like I find all this stuff really fascinating. Like all of the ways that a manufactured piece of equipment can impact the coffee experience, both at home or commercial. Like I think of ground control coffee makers and just
Yeah.
all the things that they can do, taking, some of those influences from the way that people have kind of pushed coffee at home and trying to deploy that in a commercial setting. I think, the Eversys espresso machines, the way that they just optimize stuff and make it a lot. Now, I know there's controversial opinions about automation in cafes, but I think it's really neat the way they're doing. But even when it comes to preferences, you know, in the green and
Mm.
like the roasted coffee that is being used, and how a cafe can set itself up for a certain audience. Like there is a in my hometown, there's two really good cafes now. One of them has a Slayer, um, and basically they really focus more on the cafe experience. But they didn't start that way. They started out more like they would have a shelf of like reserve coffees, and they would do, hand drip pour overs, single origin espresso, kind of off a menu. And over time, they really pared down their experience to just focus on approachable roasts, high quality, consistent, and the experience of kind of for people to hang out in their space. There is another cafe. They run a Cinesso, and they have kind of leaned more into that. There's a rotating menu for pour over or espresso, lots of really unique coffees. They also sell home barista gear. So I think like it's really interesting to see, even within how a cafe is set up, how they can kind of get pulled in different directions based on their audience. And, in that case, we see one really kind of leaning hard in that um, direction where it's been kind of pulled in this direction by people who are, home enthusiasts, really passionate about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And the other is focusing on, the average person downtown who just wants to walk in and get a great cappuccino. It is really interesting.
Hey everyone, it's Chris. We'll be right back to our conversation with Justin Piercy of Daddy Got Coffee, but I want to talk to you right now about somebody who, a company that makes it possible for your cafe to stand out in ways that sometimes we don't think about that much. But the feel of the cafe, the textures, the materials we use, very important. We're talking about stonework, tile work, hard surfaces. Arto Brick has what you need over at arto.com, but especially I want you to go and follow them at Arto Brick on Instagram. Armin, one of the sons of the founder, who is now with his brother running Arto Brick in LA. I mean, these are all made in LA. These tiles, the stonework they do for commercial spaces, for offices, for cafes, they are huge fans of the coffee world and coffee shops and creating unique spaces and working with entrepreneurs like yourself to get the details right. Right? You know, the website and the Instagram account shows their work. The handmade tiles are amazing. If you're on YouTube right now, you can see behind me, Arto was kind enough to give me a tile here, which I love, and that was pretty fun to receive in the mail. But go see them, reach out on Instagram at Arto Brick. and tell them Chris sent you from Keys to the Shop. Now, I also want to thank our sponsor, the Pacific Barista Series. Go to pacificfoodservice.com, get samples, and try this plant based beverage. They produce this barista tested and barista focused product so that it stands up to the heat from steaming. It produces great texture for latte art, and also the taste is balanced, so it kind of makes the coffee the star. And this is what you want for plant based beverages. For most of you, plant based beverages might outsell regular milk beverages. So you want to choose something really good. And I believe that product should be the Pacific Barista Series. Again, check them out at pacificfoodservice.com and give the Barista Series a try. So, with that, let's get right back to our conversation with Justin Piercy of Daddy Got Coffee. Yeah, I appreciate that breakdown of the situation, because they are it, the online experience of coffee, for the most part, is what a coffee shop owner has to go by in
Yeah.
order to know what's happening in coffee. And so when the space is dominated by people who are like yourself, providing platforms for gear reviews and experimenting with coffee. I mean, a lot of the people who are working as general managers and trainers in cafes and stuff often are not the ones who are producing this kind of content, because they don't have that's not their job
Yep.
to do it.
Yep.
So it is kind of a heavy mantle of responsibility to
Yes.
know that the things that you put out into the world are going to have some kind of a ripple effect, some of which you can't really control. But it makes me want to ask you, like, over the years, I mean, you've produced an incredible amount of content and a followership that's very impressive. You then have to say, well, what does it mean for me to be happy and satisfied with the work that I've done when it comes back in this way, or when it
Yep.
influences in this way?
Yep. Number one, I would say I have to maintain a healthy distance from metrics, like, and I love looking at metrics. But, um, and I feel like I'm pretty good at this. And I think this is good advice for any business owner. Your well being can't be tied to how your business is doing, whatever kind of business it is. Um, and as soon as it is, that should be a red flag. And that's how I treat it. Um, I think too, though, I just really enjoy doing what I do. I enjoy, number one, the constant discovery that doing what I do kind of just has about it. You're always pulling new things apart and figuring out how they work and comparing them to other things and trying different coffees with them and discovering new things every week. That just is something that I really enjoy. I also enjoy, I do enjoy looking at metrics and figuring out trends and saying, oh, this was successful. That's a surprise. Like, I love those surprise moments. Or, wow, this really didn't do as well as I thought. That also is a surprise. I love, like, I'm a serial learner, not just in coffee, but in many areas. So I would say that for that, like, that in and of itself is an enjoyment. But beyond that, I really just try and stay focused on my audience and the people who stick around, and what are they looking for, and am I serving those people well? Um, Something that I think is really important for people who may be in the situation you described, where they're a general manager at a cafe and they're looking online and trying to make decisions. Um, you know, any enthusiast community is going to be a bit of an echo chamber. And I think that that is just as true in coffee as it is for any other niche. And I think that there is a very vocal minority that makes and comments on and shares content online. And when you're looking at this stuff, it's easy to think that that minority is actually the majority. And so you could create a business plan for this cafe that's, they've got every pour over dripper, they've got the Oria, they've got origami, they've got the UFO dripper. They always have the latest and greatest. Of course, they have, the limited edition ceramic V60 from Taiwan. Then they have, they'll pull 90-second Slayer shots with single origin espresso, or like, I know that's a little dated now, but, like whatever. It's like, and they'll think that, oh my goodness, everybody online is talking about these things. This is going to be a hugely successful business if I can move into some of this stuff. And then it doesn't, because there are a lot of people talking about that. But the way that these platforms work, um, they are successful by interest, not geography. So it's like it will connect all of these people all over the world with all of the same interests in this kind of network. Like that's what social networking is. But that doesn't mean all those people are in your hometown. There might be three of them, So it can be dangerous, and it's something that content creators try and be aware of. That's why I always try and speak to like, hey, this is like enthusiast thing. You can skip this section, um, and I think that that is a real risk for people who are doing what you say, looking for things and trying to make decisions based on what they're seeing online.
Yeah.
um, you gotta It's true for me, and it's true for a cafe owner. You got to think about your audience or your customers in the case of a cafe owner, prioritize them first and make experiments on the sidelines.
You're talking about prioritizing a particular audience based on who it is you serve people online. Coffee shops serve people in a community,
Yes.
and sometimes online if we're getting technical about subscription models and that kind of stuff. But the point is that you have the assumption that there's a way to know what those people are looking for. What would you say is the way to know?
Well, you should, like, one thing that I do is like I have key performance indicators on my metrics. So it's like I always say, let the data tell the tale. So it's like if I try something and it fails, usually there's a reason. And then I'm always trying to figure out what that reason is. And I think that the reverse is true. I can try something. If it's successful, I'm happy to be surprised. I'll run another test, see if I get surprised again, and then I'll let that inform a decision in the future. I think that those are pretty universal business practices, whether or not you're a content creator or a cafe owner. I think also it's like ask your audience if you are able, and I think in the course of a cafe, um, who your best customers are, just
Mm-hmm.
like I know who my most engaged audience members are. Why don't you just ask them, and they can help inform. But you still have to bear in mind that is one person's opinion, doesn't speak for the whole of your customer base. And just like it is in the online coffee world, there is going to be a vocal minority, people who want that specific thing in your cafe, and you hear about it, you know, several times a week, and then you finally do it and nobody buys it because it was a vocal minority that was asking for it. That's something that you always have to guard against as well.
It feels like it's a long-term play in that you've invested a certain amount of attention into a rubric to judge the effectiveness of your efforts over time, where maybe you, after a year of observation, you're not as anxious about the numbers as you were during the first month you started tracking things.
Yeah,
That is
totally.
true about, I think, everything, where people that measure labor cost in a cafe, for example, and they're like, well, today's our labor cost is above 35%, but then they're not measuring it weekly or
Yes.
monthly, and
Yes.
they're actually hitting the numbers they're supposed to, but they're making too fine of an adjustment to, or they're looking under too fine of a microscope. Um, so then when you make decisions on content based on performance, how much does the surprising nature of some of it influence the way that you introduce a purposeful amount of chaos in spite of your KPIs? So because if you then only do what everyone is like, it's performing well, eventually it becomes homogenized across the board and you actually lose the audience. So where's the balance there?
Yeah. So this is interesting that you asked this question because I think this is actually really applicable to shop owners too. Number one, you need to do what you're passionate about. So it's like for me, I have a lot of opportunities to review a lot of equipment. I actually say no to a lot more than I say yes to.
Hmm.
And it's like the guiding principle for me is like, am I going to be excited to make this content, or am I just going to be feeling like it's drudgery the whole way along? And that, and then once I have identified that, then I try and stick to proven formulas and trial experiments kind of within that lane. So I'm always doing what I'm at something that I'm excited about. And sometimes I get surprised even in that. It's like, oh, I thought this would be really exciting and I don't actually like doing it now that I am. But it's like, I think that if you don't do that, then you just become a slave to the algorithm, and that's a danger for content creators, definitely. I'm not sure how that translates into the wider world, but I think making sure that there's personal passion in it for you is something that I think is probably pretty universal
Yeah.
to maybe not the success of your business, but definitely to personal fulfillment, which will lead to greater success for your business, I think.
Yeah, well said. And I feel like that's what a lot of people online would talk about is being kind of what brand is in a way that, Keys to the Shop across many episodes has a not perfect. I didn't have like a 8-year plan for a podcast. It was just more like these are interesting and I'm passionate about these things. And there are some things that I really hated putting out that I was just like, I have to put this out. I'm not exactly enthused about it. And someone's like, man, that changed my life. And okay, great, and then that makes me happy. So now I'm
Yep.
more likely to embrace that in the future. But
Yep.
there is a reinforcement of our common humanity across content. That's the intangible nature of work that you do. So Justin in his personality becomes, it's imbued in the content. So even though it's gear review, it's like your gear review, and that's why your audience listens to you. It's not so, yes, it is the accuracy of the fact that you compare to these burr sets in a scientific way, but lots of people do that technically.
Yep.
There's a way that you speak about it that resonates with them that actually makes the content more salient and absorbable.
Yeah. Well, I try to anyways, when and this is honestly, this is one reason why I still do those funny memes on my Instagram page, because
Mm,
it's like sometimes in the coffee world, I'm just like, why so serious? And it's like, but it's like, I'm pretty dry on camera. Like, I'm not like, my sense of humor is very dry, and that doesn't really translate always very well to reviews. But it's like, I like throwing those memes out because it's like, we can be equal parts obsessive and we can also laugh at ourselves.
yeah,
It's like, it's, and I think that for me, that is something that I always um, try and get across in my content is like, hey, let's just have a very grounded uh, and honest picture of ourselves as we're having this conversation here, because you know I've got kids, you know I know you're a dad too. It's like sometimes parenthood gets in the way of enjoying a good cup of coffee and everything gets a little crazy, and it's like that's just normal,
sometimes.
and to pretend that that's not normal is not reality.
Yeah,
So it's yeah, I always try and make sure that that's part of my content too.
good. Yeah, it's helpful. It's a grounder. I like you using the word grounded there because you think about what people do to prepare the ground to be healthy. There's something about creating air and space and tilling that allows the vital life beneath the soil to actually take place. And if we're
Yep.
so tightly compacted,
Yep.
there's no way any of it can get in there. But we're just like more, and denser content and more practicalities and more gear,
Yes.
uh, more metrics. And then all of a sudden we're just choking the life out of this thing that we
Absolutely.
thought we did this because of the strawberry bomb. We start
Yep.
we
Yep.
we wanted to pursue the passion of coffee, and now it's just we want to technically enjoy it instead of actually enjoying it.
Yes, totally.
What is the thing? And I want to kind of wrap up with this very, I think, a very important question for today. I'm a big believer in making people successful with coffee, right? So you are a roaster and you want people to enjoy your coffee to the maximum. They're going to tap into what you were just mentioning earlier. This is like our shelves are filled with paper filters and grinders and machines. Based on everything that you know now, 10 years virtually of gear review and exploration, what should a coffee shop, how do we make these decisions that are best to select the right gear to serve our customers well, to be successful with our coffee?
Yeah. I think this is something that my old boss taught me actually. Probably the most important thing that you can do when it comes to this type of decision in any arena is actually really clearly defining what success looks like.
Mm.
Because if you don't, it's easy to say yes to stuff. It's easy to say yes to, oh, yeah, we should upgrade our espresso machine. Oh, yeah, we should sell single dosing grinders now. Or, yeah, we should, bring in more single origins, or yes to this, yes to that. Like those, that's easy. That's like gravity. Um, it's way harder to know what you should actually say no to.
Mm.
And once you have a really clear picture of what success looks like, then you actually can say no to things and not lose sleep over it and be like, yeah, no, that's a good decision. Like, yeah, we shouldn't, yeah, that might be fun, but that's not going to move the needle for us. And I think of those two cafes in my hometown. They have defined success differently, and I don't think one cafe is more successful than the other one. I think they are successful in different ways, and success looks different to them. And they both have clear definitions, and they have chased them down, carved away, refined their businesses to the point where they look the way that they do. And I think a lot of that is the power of learning how and when to say no to things. And
Mm.
this is especially hard after you've already started something. Oh, it's like sometimes you start doing something like the one cafe has like, there was a day where I went in and they're like, oh yeah, we don't do pour over anymore, like at all. Um,
Wow.
and it's like they went from doing it to, no, we're not actually doing it. We are refocusing, and we know that's disappointing. But for them, they defined what success looked like. They ran in a direction, and they're thriving, and the other cafe is thriving. So I think it's, for me, like figuring out, um, once you figure that out, you can figure out if that new espresso machine is actually a wise investment for you. Um,
Yeah.
or if you think it is and you just don't have the money, I'm a big believer in don't over leverage yourself. So if you're moving in a direction that is going to leave you over leveraged, I would really caution against that. But it's like, hey, if you think that new espresso machine is actually going to move you to success, start saving for it. Set a little account aside in your business account, put money into it, and then once you get to that point, you can just buy it. And
Yeah.
you're not going to be worried if you can make the rent next month. And by the time that actually happens, there may be something even better. It's like very rarely do you suffer by waiting on some of these gear related decisions.
Sure.
So yeah, that's kind of how I would answer that question, Chris. You got to figure out what does that picture of success look like for you, and the more clearly you can actually do that, I think the quicker you can move in that direction.
So that you're saying that applies to commercial decisions, but also to what if I decide to put a V60 on the shelf versus a Kalita versus an origami for my customers to buy and use with my coffee, we have to, if there's some kind of a decision that we need to make. What kind of coffee do we want them to make at home with our beans, with our coffee? So I guess that's what I'm hearing you say, is that you have to decide what success looks like for the customer, even at home too.
Yep.
um, so that's hard to do, because especially now with the holidays, right? Like a lot of people have already purchased a lot of different kind of brewing equipment, some of which they don't even use in their cafe at all. And they don't have any information about how to use it the best way. So that, but they just stock it on the shelves. I guess there's some rules that we need to follow in terms of how to have a cohesive, you know, retail section, retail shelf. What would be some of the rules that you would say, hey, you know, maybe less is more, or how do we approach that without like overburdening our customers with too many choices or the wrong choices?
I think again, it becomes like, what does success look like for you? Are you a roaster? You're trying to sell more of your coffee, and you want to be able to resource people who are brewing at home also with the best coffee. Maybe you bring in some V60s and you create little recipe cards. That was actually one of the first things when we went to pilot. I took home a bunch of those recipe cards that they have, like, hey, this
Uh,
is how you brew our coffee, and that was actually really helpful. Um, if success looks like, no, we want to be the hub in town for home enthusiasts,
mm-hmm.
um, then bring in a couple Oreos, bring in a couple ceramic origamis, stick them on the shelf, because when a home enthusiast comes in and sees those things sitting on the shelf, that is going to send a message to them. And it's got, if you want to be that hub for home enthusiasts, then you have to back it up with different things on the menu and that kind of thing. And maybe that retail section, um, maybe you just have it there and the actual intent isn't to actually make money with that stuff. It's to bring in a certain type of customer and establish yourself as the place in town for that customer.
Yeah.
I think it really depends on, like, what are you trying to do with your overall business plan. Some cafes, I think, like, can overthink the retail thing, and it's nice to have it there, but also most people are just going to buy on Amazon. Drives me crazy, but it just is reality. So again, I think it depends on the specific cafes. So much of this stuff comes down to context, right? Like, it's all context dependent. So I would say
Yeah.
define what success looks like, and then allow that to inform some of those decisions.
The words that I'm left with here, one of the words I'm thinking about is intentionality.
Absolutely.
Creating a, whether it's a YouTube video about a grinder or stocking a grinder or the beans you purchase, and all of our, you know, creative efforts boil down to the level of intention we put behind them. um, so I'm glad that we kind of rounded out our conversation on this idea, because it really is just it's a journey, and we kind of find some version of ourselves within the content that we create, whether
Yeah,
that's a
absolutely.
cappuccino in a cafe or a gear review video. um, it's all kind of connected. So Justin, this was fun to talk to you, and
Yeah, yeah, it was fun.
yeah,
Yeah, I
what can we do to stay plugged into all your content?
oh, you can subscribe. If I would say, if you're a home enthusiast, you can subscribe on my YouTube, because otherwise it might be kind of boring for you. I'm not totally into the commercial reviews yet. I've kind of considered that, but
Mm,
it's, if you're into that stuff, follow on YouTube. I try and post funny stuff on Instagram too. So if you just want to, like, a little laugh in your day, you can hit me up there too. Daddy Got Coffee is the channel.
all right, Justin, pleasure to have you on the show.
Yep. Thanks, Chris. It was a pleasure to be here.
Okay, everyone. Well, I hope that you enjoyed that conversation. Big thank you to Justin from Daddy Got Coffee for joining us. If you want more information or just get plugged into that world with all of these reviews and content from Daddy Got Coffee, go check him out on YouTube. It's Daddy Got Coffee on YouTube, also Daddy Got Coffee on Instagram, and also, of course, daddygotcoffee.com. And thank you so much, Justin. It was really great. One of the things I appreciated about this conversation, especially, was the idea that, these worlds of home enthusiasts and the way that they make coffee, it's something that influences the way we in cafes are offering our services to customers as well. Now, we are also influencers in the sense that we educate on, yeah, what a cortado is, what a cappuccino is, what equipment should I use. Your baristas are asked these questions all the time. And when this comes out, this episode is like post Christmas, but the holiday season is going to be this time where I think you probably had a lot of questions. People got a lot of questions about, what should I get for my loved ones? They're really into coffee. What brewer? This is the work that Justin is just like so focused on. And I think we can learn a lot from the example of how to curate that information well, especially across the counter to a customer who just wants to be successful in brewing a cup of coffee that they love. And gosh darn it, they want to use your coffee to do it. That's a nice symbiotic relationship. And so I remember a time when enthusiasts, and there are still enthusiasts out there that will kind of pester, if I say that word, pester the barista a little bit. And, that's not all of them, right? I think the level of seriousness with which people who love coffee at home take it brings all of us up. And so I'm really grateful for that. And I think that that's one of my big takeaways from this conversation. So again, check them out. Daddy Got Coffee. Thank you, Justin. Now, if you're interested in reaching out to me, you just want to say, hey, you have questions or comments, or you're interested in Keys to the Shop consulting, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com, and also reach out on Instagram at Keys to the Shop. Just follow us there and send a DM to me, and we'll have a conversation about whatever. So lastly, key holder coaching groups, masterminds of coffee shop owners meeting for 6 months, 12 1-hour jam-packed, very valuable sessions of focused encouragement, feedback, problem solving, and owner community. That's what key holder coaching groups are all about. We're halfway through our 3rd season, going great, and a new season's coming up in March. So if you're interested, bug in your ear. If you're making your strategic plan for 2025, Keys to the Shop's mastermind group, the key holder coaching groups, might be a valuable part of what you end up investing in for that time. So send your email of inquiry for that to chris@keystotheshop.com. And with that, I say thank you. Thank you so much. Have a happy new year. Have a wonderful beginning of your 2025. Thank you for spending all this time with me. Stay tuned for a bit of a reflection episode, because on January 3rd is our anniversary of 8 years of Keys to the Shop. So I'll do kind of like a little special episode there. Why not? And we'll be talking to you soon. Thank you for supporting the show. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.